Hey everybody, Professor Snart checking in on Monday morning here. As things roll right along, we're through week 1 of our 5-week course already, which is kind of amazing. A little bit shorter because of the Monday holiday, but you'll find that they all really tear by like this. So we've done introductions, a couple of things about the framing a memory exercise and how do I write, really thinking about writing as not evolving from, but kind of emerging from aspects of memory, and which is all part of like perception and how we see things. And now we get into a couple of units, both due on the same day, so Unit 3 and 4 due Tuesday, June 5th, thinking a little bit more towards the actual writing part, which is first a look at the idea of metaphor or analogy, any kind of, this is like that or this is that, sort of drawing those parallels. So in addition to writing out of kind of memory or our experience, one thing that I talked about earlier is how do you then take that and make it something more than just I saw this, I did this, the tree was green, blah, 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 that kind of stuff. How do you make it literary? Or how do you make it interesting to other people so it's not just your own personal journal that you're writing? And that really happens through the use of lots of language or writing devices. But one of the most fundamental is metaphor or analogy, drawing that comparison between two things. And of course the best situation, or let's say the worst situation, is the cliche, right? Because that comparison doesn't work to make us interested anymore because we've heard it so many times. So the best metaphor or analogy is always the one where the comparison works. There is similarities between the two things being described. But it's not cliche. It's not something we've heard so many times. We don't even think of it as a comparison anymore. So Unit 3 has you really thinking about that kind of use of language as really the most fundamental building block you have as a writer. And it really doesn't matter on what the genre is. It could be short fiction, poetry, nonfiction. It's still this technique of making the familiar unfamiliar, of making us interested, even in common, ordinary, everyday things. And how do you do that? Well, you do it by revealing for the reader certain linkages or connections between things that he or she might not have perceived before. So it's a fairly straightforward discussion board here, just getting you to think about metaphors or analogies that you've run into recently, probably in some of the reading that you've been doing, or whatever the case might be. And then, of course, to sort of explain what is being compared to what. And there's lots of, kind of subcategories of these sorts of analogous writing, or the this is like that kind of comparison, simile, metaphor, analogy, and there's a whole bunch of other ones. We're really less concerned with the terminology and more concerned with actually using those techniques, the technique of analogy, to bring basic elements of description or of memory or even of recounting events, to bring that to life, to make it interesting for the reader to read. So a fairly straightforward discussion board here, but again, pretty important for getting us thinking like writers a little bit. And then the same thing really goes for Unit 4, which is the elements of short fiction. So we're doing a couple of readings here. There's a couple of interviews and readings that were recorded with various local writers by my friend and colleague here, Tom Montgomery Fate at the college. So that's the person you'll see who's doing the interviews in the videos here. And then the idea in the unit is to take all of that sort of background stuff or the other work that people have done, various sort of theories about how short stories operate and how language works or how the overall structure works. And then to answer a few questions in the discussion board here about your own kind of reflection on that and how you ultimately see the craft of writing at work in the work of these writers and the sort of ideas that we look at for this unit. And then the last question here, what did you learn from the interviews that you can use as a writer? This really sort of preps us. This is the final step before we do our first workshop unit where you're actually submitting your own work to peers in the class, is all of the reading stuff that we do, whether it's the textbook stuff in the units, video stuff that we watch, any of that is all really designed to get you thinking about, well, how does this impact me as a writer? What can I take away that can make my writing better? What do I dislike about some of the readings that we've done, or what some of the interview folks have had to say? So sometimes negative examples can help you as well, because it's a certain strategy or technique or style that doesn't connect with you. It doesn't mean it's wrong or bad, it just is not your cup of tea. So you want to avoid that, and again, you want to really articulate, like, why don't you like that, or what doesn't work about that, not just, that's stupid. That doesn't help you as a writer. You can certainly dislike things, but you want to be kind of particular about why, so that you can make conscious choices to do something different. So again, all of this context stuff is really leading us up to Unit 5, I think it is. Look at our list here. Yeah, Unit 5, which is our first workshop, where you're writing your own short stories, submitting it to your group, and there's peer exchange. So there's a lot of the technical how-to stuff about making this work, which I'd suggest you read now, even though that due date isn't coming up for a little while, although we move so quickly that it's like the end of this week, basically. So we have Units 3 and 4 then due on Tuesday, June 5th, and then really right around the corner is our first, the first writing assignment of the kind of creative writing part of the class. So we're moving right along here. If you have any questions, be sure to be in touch with me, and I will get back to you as soon as I can.